The Riva, think bigger.
America spends Sunday nights with Trey Gowdy. He's talking the biggest issues facing the nation.
It's one thing to see the problem. It's even better if you see a solution.
And defending your freedom with the facts. Don't miss Sunday Night America with Trey Gowdy at 7, only on Fox News Channel.
Hey everyone, this is Outnumbered. Thanks for joining us. I'm Julie Banderas. Joining me today, Cheryl Casoni, Jackie DeAngelis, Dr. Nicole Sapphire, and Jason Chavitz. So we're going to begin with the border crisis, right? Because Texas is now sending migrants to a third Democratic-run city. Fox News was there, in fact, last night, and we saw it happen when two buses arrived at the Chicago's Union Station carrying an estimated 80 to 100 migrants who crossed the southern border illegally. Mayor Lori Lightfoot's office lashed out in a blistering statement, quote, "Unfortunately, Texas Governor Greg Abbott is without any shame or humanity. But ever since he put these racist practices of expulsion into place, we've been working with our community partners to ready the city to receive these individuals," and accusations of racism also echoing in the liberal media this week. Watch.
I mean, the conservative estimate is about $80,000 per bus trip. But we know that, racists don't mind paying this money. So racists, are willing to pay the money, and they don't care if taxpayers pay the brunt.
I'm going to start with you, Jason. How is this racist? Because last I checked, Chicago is a sanctuary city. So you have sanctuary city laws, which means you welcome immigrants. So now we're sending you the immigrants, and now we're racists?
Yeah, look, Governor Abbott and Governor Ducey in Arizona, I applaud them for doing this. It's all about diversity, right? Like, why should all the people who come here illegally just stay in Texas,
right,
Arizona, California, New Mexico? So they go to these other cities. That sounds like diversity to me. It doesn't cost $80,000 to do it. These people do it voluntarily.
Mm-hmm.
They sign up for it. They get on a bus. And the federal government's been sending them out on airplanes. So why is it that racist if far more people have gone on airplanes to New York and other places? I think it's an absolutely absurd assertion. And if you want to solve the problem, then go down to the southern border, see it for yourself, and fix it.
Exactly. Or I don't know, pay attention to the news, because Cheryl, you remember we were talking about this the other day about how the press secretary literally battled it out with Peter Ducey, denying the fact that immigrants are walking over the border when we watch them with our cameras every day. Of course, she's not watching Fox, and the other channels, of course, don't cover it. Abbott is trying to send a message clearly to the White House. And he says that President Biden's inaction at our southern borders continues to put lives of Texans and Americans at risk and is overwhelming our communities. So these small border towns in Texas are completely overwhelmed. They have zero help from the administration. So what else to do? Send them to Washington. Maybe they can do something about them.
Chicago, D.C., New York, your sanctuary cities. Well, you know what? Time to live up to that moniker.
Mm-hmm.
The talk is over. Time to show action. Lightfoot is doing what I think is a very lazy response to what's happening. Meanwhile, Texas Governor Abbott has made a very clear and strong response. What has he done? Okay, Operation Lone Star. Let's go through this. Deployed the National Guard, Texas National Guard. Thousands of DPS troopers, constructed barriers, engaged Mexican northern border states in how to handle the crisis. Reached across the border, folks, everybody. We're talking about fentanyl. We're talking about cocaine. This huge bust we just had last week that we found out about. Biggest bust of cocaine in 20 years coming across the border. Governor Abbott has said enough is enough. But this is not just his problem. And it's already cost him $12 million to send these migrants on these buses. So it's not like he's just doing it because he's a racist or he's doing it out of spite. He's putting his money where his mouth is, the taxpayers of Texas, because Texas has had it. They're overrun. Enough is enough.
The White House needs to listen to the statistics, to the facts, to the numbers, because they are alarming. It's a humanitarian crisis. You are absolutely correct. The number of migrants bused to big cities is just a sliver of the crisis at the border. Around 9,000 have actually been bused from Texas since May. That pales in comparison to the 649,000 encounters of the southern border in that very same time frame. And this is a president that loved to insult the former administration for putting kids in cages, which was a bunch of crap. That did not happen. Children were temporarily separated from their parents, but they were reunited. What's happening now? There are children on these buses and children that are being sent over into this country across the border illegally without their parents. What is this administration doing about it?
It's tragic, and they're doing nothing about it. And they do know what's going on. Even if they don't watch our channel, they do see these pictures and they know, but they're turning a blind eye to it. And what's really interesting is this is classic left hypocrisy, not in my backyard, right? When it comes to the energy industry, for example, and their windmills and their solar panels, not in my backyard. Don't block my view. That's what's happening here. When it comes to the red states, you can overrun them with illegal migrants, and that's fine. They have to use their taxpayer dollars to clean up that mess and to support those people. But, you know, Adams and Lightfoot and Bowser, they're saying, we don't want it here, even though they have declared that sanctuary city status. You can't do that. This is not a red state problem. This is an everybody problem at this point. And this is an administration that has made it become an everyone problem. And those numbers were really staggering. It just shows you how overrun Abbott is. He's at his last straw here and is kind of saying, you got to help out. You have to pull your weight. You cannot say this is okay and then not accept migrants in your towns.
Yeah, no, it's a national crisis. And I mean, this administration had a difficulty in using the word crisis when describing this fiasco. But quite frankly, this is also not only a national crisis, it's a political crisis for the Democratic Party, because come the midterms, I can tell you right now, they are going to be hit where it hurts when it comes to immigration.
Well, obviously they're concerned because it's the easiest cop out when you disagree with something to call someone a racist. They say it with such conviction, like that's a fact. But even though it's not true at all. I mean, unfortunately, you have Democrats who just completely weaponize the term racism. They're diluting the severity of what it actually is. You have former President Obama and Biden. They would call the Senate filibuster racist when it wasn't working for their Democratic policies. But then on the other hand, they would actually say, no, the filibuster is a good thing. It's essential for our democratic process when it was helping them. You have Democratic politicians and Black Lives Matter who would say the police are racist if they were interrogating Black Americans when it came to violent crimes. Yet statistically, Blacks have a higher propensity to do the violent crimes. And of note, also Blacks tend to be victims of violent crimes, the people the police are trying to protect. So when you have these racial disparities, it's not always because of racism. Sometimes cultural issues and also logistics get in the way. When you're talking about taking migrants to these other cities, that is basic logistics, because these border towns, they do not have the infrastructure to support this rapid influx of people. And why shouldn't these democratic cities who say they're sanctuary cities and say they welcome migrants and diversities, why shouldn't they help bear the burden? This is not racism. This is basic economics.
You know what's interesting too is, Jason, the fact that Hispanics in this country are leaning further and further away from the Democratic Party. I mean, when you want to talk about racism, we're not just talking about Black people, we're talking about brown people. And brown people are seriously offended by this administration and their lack of due diligence when it comes to issuing the safety at the border for those illegal immigrants that are coming in, especially for the children.
Well, many of the people that are coming because they want law and order. And so we need to have law and order. It's this fiction to suggest that every person that comes is Hispanic. They come from more than 150 countries. Now, the majority will come from Central and South America because of the proximity, and from Mexico. But don't suggest to us that it's just those people. 150 different countries are flowing through these countries. And what are these Democrats so worried about? If you turn to the White House, say it, the border's secure. It's closed. Nobody's walking across the border. That's what they're hearing. And that's the lie and the fiction. So which one is it?
No, I bet you if the president knew that all these migrants coming into the country were Republicans, he'd put up a wall. He doesn't want them coming in and affecting our elections come the midterms. All right, we're going to move on now. We'll be moving on to this. The White House repeating that MAGA Republicans are an extreme threat to our democracy as media follows Biden's example of ramping up aggressive attacks on Republicans. That's next.
Follow the leader, follow me. Follow the leader, 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 follow the leader. Follow the leader, 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 follow the leader. Hands up, down, up, down. Everybody now.
They said it couldn't be done.
Because the big drug companies have billions of dollars and an army of lobbyists.
But AARP has never run from a tough fight.
They stood with their 38
what you made me do. Look what you made me do. Look what you just made me do. Look what you just made me. Ooh, look what you made me do. Look what you made
Well,
me
President Biden on his way to Philadelphia, where he's expected to campaign on his promise of unity, while he's lashing out at what he calls ultra MAGA Republicans and how they're a threat to democracy. However, despite the criticism of bashing a large group of Americans, the White House repeated the attack yesterday.
The president thinks that there is an extremist threat to our democracy. The president has been clear as he can be on that particular piece when we talk about a democracy, when we talk about our freedoms. The way that he sees is the MAGA Republicans are the most energized part of the Republican Party.
And the left-wing media, of course, following Biden's example of aggressive attacks on Republicans.
They're a dime store front for a terrorist movement.
Party of dupes, party of knuckleheads, party of weirdos, party of freaks. So that is a simple message. And underneath that, it's the party of nothing.
There is no alternative right now because the Republican Party project today is a fascist authoritarian project.
The most extreme, saying semi-fascist leads me only to the question, what's semi about that? It's full-on fascism.
All right, there's a lot to get to here, but obviously this was a president who campaigned from his basement on unity, Julie. I have another soundbite. It's a montage of how he talked about unity and how he's actually doing the opposite of what he said. Let's start there and react to that.
History, faith, and reason show the way of unity. We can see each other not as adversaries, but as neighbors. We can treat each other with dignity and respect, for without unity, there is no peace, only bitterness and fury.
Let me tell you about this ultra MAGA agenda. I never expected the ultra MAGA Republicans who seem to control the Republican Party now to have been able to control the Republican Party. I never anticipated that happening.
The MAGA Republicans don't just threaten our personal rights and economic security. They're a threat to our very democracy. Trump and the extreme MAGA Republicans have made their choice to go backwards, full of anger, violence, hate, and division. But we've chosen a different path. Forward.
Doesn't sound like unity to me.
No, and let me just remind the president that there are extremists on both sides, because I'm so sick and tired of hearing about the president and other Democrats talking about extreme MAGA Republicans. There are extreme Democrats as well that aren't tearing up cities, and that's the whole joy of being an American, is that you can have differing opinions. This president is a hypocrite because he came out and he campaigned on one promise, on several failed promises, but on the one promise of unifying these two parties and actually getting things done, reaching across the aisle. What he is doing is preaching hate speech, as far as I'm concerned, because using the words like fascist and racist, those are really ugly words, very much like Hillary Clinton when she was talking about the deplorables. Where does that get you? And actually what it's doing is it's losing your party. You are losing Democrats to the Republican Party. The more you alienate your own people, the more they will run. It's not a way to win votes, and it's certainly not a good way to win over people.
I think it's a great point. And when it comes to the left, MSNBC, Joy Reid, she spins this and she says he's basically the most inoffensive president we've ever seen. He's apple pie. He's all America. Watch.
Joe Biden, who's the most middle of the road, pro-police, working class, inoffensive, purposefully inoffensive politician of his generation, is painted as an extremist. And Donald Trump is considered almost a Jesus-like figure for people in the MAGA world. How much danger are we in, really?
Cheryl.
She is unbelievable to me. I mean, let's go back to August 4th to comments from Joy Reid. You want to talk about inflammatory. She basically said that Florida Governor Ron DeSantis was creating a, quote, white nationalist movement. That's from Joy Reid. Then she said that he was an authoritarian with policies tantamount to child abuse. So, but yet President Biden, who's just called half the country semi-fascist, is inoffensive. It's amazing to me they keep defending him because they have nothing else to defend him on. He's failed on the economy. We're in a recession. He's failed with inflation. The midterms are going to be a disaster for them. They know it. They're grabbing onto whatever they can, and now it's attacking the slogan, "Make America Great Again." Why is that a bad slogan? We believe in our country. We want to see it prosper.
Yeah, and when it comes to the average Republican in this country, Jason, I think if you ask them, are you ultra MAGA? They wouldn't even know what that means, right? They would just say, no, what I'm trying to do is work hard, put food on the table, make sure my kids are educated, make sure the American dream is still alive, the next generation does better than I did. And all of this reckless spending and everything that we're doing right now that's so progressive, so left wing, it's not working with that agenda, and they're worried about it. That's what I think they would say.
Yeah, I think they are worried. Look, Joe Biden promised to unite, and he's only doing division. That's what he's doing. You don't generally divide the country and attack the people you want to actually garner votes from. Look what they're not talking about. They're not talking about inflation. They're not talking about gas prices. They're not talking about immigration. They're not talking about crime. And that's because they don't have anything to say. The Democrats have had the House and Senate and the presidency. And finally, I will say to the people that try to compare Americans and somebody who believes in making America great again to Nazis.
Yeah.
The Nazis exterminated more than 10 million people. And to say that somehow, as somebody who loves God and reads the Bible and believes in the Bible, or maybe has a gun, that somehow we're not American enough, that we don't believe in democracy, is so offensive to its core. These people have got to be called out for that. Anybody who goes out and tries to compare somebody to a Nazi, they don't understand the gravity to which this country and this world went through the devastation of the extermination of more than 10 million people, and it's terribly offensive.
Yeah, and when it comes to Dr. Sapphire, sort of this rhetoric that's out there, many people are saying this is just going to backfire because it was very slim in the last election, if you recall, and alienating half the voters out there is not the best strategy going into the midterms, yet the White House is doubling down on this.
Well, Jackie, Jason was on point when he said that what is coming out of the mouths of the Democrats right now is vile and reprehensible. And when you have these people, they are just become the party of condescension. And as you pointed out, it wasn't like the election was a landslide. Yeah. Biden just didn't take the election. He's talking about nearly half of our country that they are talking down to in this way. And by the way, hard-working, blue-collar Americans who are just trying to get food on their table, they're trying to keep their constitutional rights, and they want less government interference. They cannot be likened to terrorists who killed 3,000 Americans in 9/11 or the 6 to 10 million Jews who were exterminated by these fascists. The fact that they continue to use this rhetoric and this terminology, these needs to be stricken down, and it is you cannot defend them.
Yeah. We're going to leave it there, but we've got a lot more coming up. New data revealing the worst drop in test scores in decades for fourth grade school children, while classrooms across the country focus on woke ideologies and pronouns instead of the core curriculum. That's next.
Should we do one more? Yeah, let's do one more. Just be safe. You want to do one more just to get you high as shit?
Roll the windows up when I get in the car, and I'ma light one up. Hit the gas station, go and buy a cigar, and we can smoke this blunt. Speeding on the Sunset Strip in the nighttime, yeah, trying to get fucked up.
Hey, all my smokers, lights on.
Roll the windows up, roll it up right now when I'm smoking. Yeah. I just lit a spliff, blew it in a cop's face. I just hit a switch so they couldn't see the plates. Pull up to the crib, drove past 4 gates. Yeah. Gave her half my dick, that was all that she could take. Hey, use both hands like she trying to say grace. Hey, said amen, then I blessed her face. Amen. I don't order by the bag, I order by the crate. I'ma smoke until the sun's blocked, I don't use drapes. I was really out in Cleveland selling raps on tapes. I had a couple of people with me that I watched turn fake. I still keep gorillas with me, I ain't talking about bait. I'm a wizard with the potions, I ain't talking about Snape. Hey, I put a bag on my carry-on luggage, I walk through the airport, I'm holding the shit. Somebody else put the coke in their ass, and they walking through like they holding the shit. My boy just snuck through the metal detector, and he got a pole like he ready to fish. Whenever I get a Grammy, I'm popping the top, and I'm pouring a foreign away. Holy shit, I'm so high, I just high-five this holiness. Damn, every shot I take, I make, it's like I'm Kobe's wrist. This how I feel after a decade of me making hits. So if my name ain't on that bitch, you shouldn't make a list. Roll the windows up when I get inside the car, I mean. Roll the windows down when I open up the jar. See, I'ma call the mayor if they try and press a charge. I'm a mob boss, I be pulling strings like my guitar, yeah. Roll the windows up when I get in the car, and I'ma light one up. Hit the gas station, go and buy a cigar, and we can smoke this blunt. Speeding on the Sunset Strip in the nighttime, yeah. Trying to get fucked up. Hey, hey. Roll the windows up, roll it up right now when I'm smoking.
I'm fried. I hope we got it. No smoke. Hey, Smoker Drive is out on streaming.
So while classrooms across the country focus on woke ideologies and pronouns instead of, what kids are supposed to learn, core curriculum, devastating new data has revealed the worst drop in math and reading scores in decades for fourth grade students. According to national test scores of fourth graders released this morning, decades of growth in reading and math were wiped away by just 2 years of COVID-disrupted learning. Math scores dropping 7 points during that period, marking a first-ever decline, while reading scores slipped 5 points, producing the largest dip in 30 years on what is being called the nation's report card. Meanwhile, while Johnny has to play catch up with his math and reading, classrooms across the country appear to be preoccupied with teaching kids the ever-growing list of pronouns and why being white is bad instead of core curriculum. Our children are in such a difficult time, Nicole, because having a child in school right now as a parent could not be the more frustrating moment of their educational lives. And now they are behind. Why? Because they were on Zoom calls, because they were forced to wear masks where they couldn't see the faces of their teachers trying to teach them math and reading. And now we as parents are going to suffer, and our poor children are going to suffer the most.
Well, Julie, let's be clear. You see the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, everyone's talking about the fact that these scores came out and they're like, oh my gosh, the kids are not okay. Yet we know. We've known that since the end of summer 2020, when Fair Health came out with data showing that children were taking up a larger amount of percentages going to the emergency department because of mental health issues, suicide attempts, overdoses. We knew at the very beginning that they weren't okay with the lockdowns and the virtual learning. But what happened? You had the teachers union, which doubled down, continued to keep them out of school. You had some very brave teachers that came forward saying, the virtual learning is not working for kids, especially those who have learning difficulties. And yet, even as we entered to early 2022, you still had some schools with kids virtual learning, despite all the data that came out showing that it wasn't working, but you had teachers unions still pushing for it. You had a Biden administration and the CDC who was supporting their right to keep them closed down. And now here we go. And we see the aftermath. You have fourth grade students who are not doing well with reading and math. These are fundamental to their development. They were in the second and third grade throughout the course of the pandemic. That is when you get the basics of your education. We have done a massive disservice to this entire population, and it will take years to recover.
Yeah, no, I mean, Jason, I have a 9-year-old daughter. I am in the thick of this, and I've been complaining about this since the beginning of the pandemic, that I'm afraid I may actually have to hold my children back a year. I mean, because math is something critical, and reading that my 9-year-old, and I'm seeing it with my very own eyes, now that the masks have been taken off, she's been doing better. But we just lost a year and a half of my child's education. Who's going to make that up for me? Because you took it away. I want it back. There's no getting it back. That time is gone. And I don't see the administration speaking out about this and thinking, okay, here's our solution. They don't have a solution.
I yield all my time to Nicole and Julie on this topic because you know what? Look, the moms across the country, they know this. They understand it. And dads too. Let's give them a little bit of credit here. But of course this happened, and it was avoidable, and it continues on. There's still school districts that are doing this, and it was fundamentally wrong. Fourth grade is so pivotal. Every age is pivotal, but what we did to the kids, the way it was done, was just wrong.
Yeah, I want to talk about woke theories that are running rampant amongst our schools. First of all, it's the woke theory. It's teaching, to be white, and God forbid you actually teach about history because we want to wipe away history. We don't want to talk about, slavery and President Lincoln and all of that. We want to talk about being bisexual and transsexual. And first of all, no word that has the word sexual in it should be in any curriculum that my children are being taught. I even have a 12-year-old, and I don't even want to be taught that, let alone my 6-year-old and my 9-year-old. Worry about reading and writing. That's what's going to get them into college, not, oh, by the way, you might be bisexual.
Yeah.
That doesn't matter when it comes to college prep.
And not only did we lose the last year and a half as a result of the pandemic, but basically going in this direction of woke education essentially is taking away from the core curriculum. You go to China, Julie, I did an exchange program there, and I used to go to a Chinese school. I had a Chinese host sister, and you would watch the rigor that these kids started with. They'd start their day at 7:30. They were doing exercise drills outside, right? And they were working until the end of the day. They'd come home, they would study until the end of the night. That rigor is still there. China wants to be the world's largest superpower. They want to eat our lunch. They are training the future to be able to do that while we're basically just giving it away.
Yeah.
Economic output. And I was looking at the data in this study. 215 is a score of reading out of 500. 215. That is frightening for these fourth graders. It's going to take decades for these kids to catch up. This is what happens, Julie, when you let teachers' unions run the roost. And that's exactly what happened with education across this country. And remember Wisconsin? Remember what they were trying to teach there? I think it was gender identity, sexual orientation, all of that. Look, at the end of the day, these kids have suffered. And this is going to be the future of our country. If we don't do something now, we are going to be in trouble as a country. And Jackie's absolutely right. The Chinese are way ahead of us and some other countries as well when it comes to teaching.
Cheryl's absolutely correct, but guess what's still happening? In D.C., you have the mayor saying if your kids aren't vaccinated, they don't get to go to school. And by the way, there's no option for them at all. No. And less than 50% of Black kids in that area are vaccinated. So what, we're just going to forget about those kids too? Obviously, it's not a priority to them to get these kids educated.
In D.C., those kids are disappearing too, Nicole, to your point. They're finding those kids are actually gone. They can't track them down.
No, it is. It's a war against woke. And it's interesting because ironically, I actually just collaborated with Brave Books to write their September Book of the Month Club. Basically, the title of my book is Fiona's Fantastical Fort. It teaches perseverance in a fun way for your children. I personally have always touted that I want my kids to grow up knowing that they can persevere even when life gets tough. And so we're going to talk more about this next. My kids absolutely adore the Freedom Island Book of the Month Club from Brave Books. Each month, Brave produces a new book that teaches a lesson that is pro-American, anti-woke, and builds character. Not only are the books connected, but they are of the highest quality, from the illustrations and stories to the awesome games and questions in the back. Guys, guess who the author is of the September book? Who? Me, Mommy! What? Awesome! Yes!
That's awesome.
That wasn't acted out at all, by the way. That was maybe the 10th take.
Cool.
You can purchase your copy at bravebooks.com. We'll have more on this. I hope you all enjoy. We'll be right back.
You see, son, with a little elbow grease, you can do just about anything.
Thanks, Dad.
That's right, Robert. And it's never too early to learn you could save with America's #1 motorcycle insurer.
That's right, Jamie. But it's not just about savings. It's about the friends we make along.
Astro. Yeah. Sun is down, freezing cold. That's how we already know. When it's here, my dog will probably do it for a Louis Bell. That's just all he know, he don't know nothing else. I tried to show him. Yeah. I tried to show him. Yeah. 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 Gone on you with the pick and roll. Younger flame, he in sicko mode.
Nathan's here with all the ice on in the booth. At the gate outside, when they pull up, they give me loose. Yeah, jump out, boys. That's Nike boys hopping our coops. This shit way too big. When we pull up, give me the loot. Give me the loot. Was off the Remy, had up at post. Had to hit my old town to duck the news. 2-4-hour lockdown, we made no moves. Now it's 4 a.m. and I'm back up popping with the crew. I just landed in Chase B mixes pop like Jamba Joe's. Different color chains, see my jeweler really selling fruits. And they joking, man, know the crackers wish it was a news.
Sunset.
Surrender, retreat, we all in too deep. Plan for keeps, don't play us a week. Surrender, retreat, we all in too deep. Plan for keeps, don't play us a week.
This shit way too formal, y'all know I don't follow suit. Stacy Dash, most of these girls ain't got a clue. All of these hoes I made off records I produce. I might take all my exes and put them all in a group. Hit my essays, I need the booch. About to turn this function into Bonnaroo. Told her hop in, you coming too. In the 305, bitches treat me like I'm Uncle Luke. Have to slot the top off, it's just a roof. She said, where we going? I said the moon. We ain't even make it to the room. She thought it was the ocean, it's just a pool. Now I gotta open, it's just a ghost. Who put this shit together? I'm the glue. So and said, shorty face, Tommy out the blue. So and said,
Plan for keeps,
so and said, motherfucker, so and said.
don't play us a week.
To discuss your case now.
800-837-1374.
Veteran homeowners, need cash? With the New Day 100 loan, there are no upfront costs for appraisal or termite inspections. No upfront costs at all to get the cash you need. Veterans get more at New Day.
Call 1-833-804-3650.
The homeless crisis in blue cities even worse than you imagined. Here in New York City, banks have been locking out ATM users at night in an attempt to keep homeless people out of those ATMs, some who've been using the vestibules as toilets. And in San Francisco, shocking new figures showing that 8,000 people are living on the streets. In Los Angeles, voters will soon have to decide if hotels can be forced to rent their in an attempt to keep homeless people out of the day.
Call 1-833-804-3650.
The homeless crisis in blue cities even worse than you imagined. Here in New York City, banks have been locking out ATM users at night in an attempt to keep homeless people out of those ATMs, some who've been using the vestibules as toilets. And in San Francisco, shocking new figures showing that 8,000 people are living on the streets. In Los Angeles, voters will soon have to decide if hotels can be forced to rent their vacant rooms to the homeless. Cheryl, I want to start with you. You and I came in every single day during the pandemic. We would commiserate about our experiences on the streets of New York City. Have you been in a Starbucks lately? They're closing 16 stores in these woke cities because of the drug use in Starbucks, accosting the baristas, using the bathrooms as toilets. I mean, your take on it.
They made that announcement back in July, to your point. Starbucks did, and it was Portland, it was San Francisco, it was New York, the cities that have been most overrun. And when did hotels become the answer to the homeless problem in these cities, in particular, especially in New York and San Francisco? These people are mentally ill. Many of them are drug addicted. What was happening in the bathrooms at Starbucks, besides the baristas getting assaulted, was that they were using those open bathrooms as basically to do drugs within and then walk out without being paying customers. So, you know, one thing, I just got back from San Francisco, actually, we were talking about it. But, you know, I couldn't believe what I saw in that city. I used to live there. It made me so sad because, I mean, we're talking full living rooms out on the street. And now the Castro Merchants Association in San Francisco has said enough is enough. We're not going to pay taxes. We can't get people to come in the door. Our storefronts are getting vandalized. Enough is enough. And businesses are pulling out of these cities, and that's what's happening.
Yeah, and in California, Jason, you imagine they start letting homeless people rent out these hotel rooms. What if you're a mother, you're traveling with your children, and you rent a hotel room to have a vacation or whatever the case may be, and it could be dangerous.
Well, it could be. Look, why should the voters be able to decide whether or not a private business, a private entity has to do this? This is going to the local Holiday Inn Express can be a nice experience, but you don't have to be. Why are we forcing this to happen on these private businesses? Look, Gavin Newsom says he has all the answers to everything in California, but there's a reason why, for the very first time in its history, people are fleeing California. They're losing their population. They're going to Idaho and Utah and Texas and Florida, and there's a reason why. This policy that these Democrats run in these big cities is absolutely failing. They're giving out too many benefits, and they're just tolerating all of this drug use. And it's absolutely something that's avoidable.
And Adams is failing here, Julie, right?
Yeah.
So the banks are responding by saying we're going to have to lock the vestibules so homeless people don't sleep in them and so our patrons can be safe. But again, this is like the Band-Aid approach instead of trying to address the root cause. Why isn't he addressing the homeless crisis on our streets and the mentally ill?
Yeah, I mean, the fact that ATM machines in New York City at multiple banks, including one that I bank at, are being closed overnight because homeless people are not only using them as their hotel rooms, but their bathrooms. I mean, it's disgusting. And these businesses, by the way, these banks, who's helping them clean up the mess? Not the city. The city created this mess. They need to clean it up, figuratively and literally speaking. There are homeless people defecating outside ATM machines inside these vestibules that are now having to be locked up. And I don't see one Democratic mayor stepping forward and standing up for these businesses who have already lost so much through the pandemic.
Homelessness is a huge problem. Dr. Sapphire, I see so many mentally ill on our streets. It's actually heartbreaking. You have to stand back and say, Mayor Adams, are you seeing this? Do you actually think this is better for these people, not, you know, to mention the community as well, to let people wander around like this without giving them the help and attention they need?
Well, this is a crisis, a problem, Jackie, that we're perpetuating in itself. So we were talking about education. All of a sudden, our children are getting less education. And what goes parallel, hand in hand with decreased education, decreased future earning potential, increased crime, and other things that also contribute to homelessness. And as Cheryl mentioned earlier, a lot of the homeless, they do have mental illness. But again, we're flooding our system. We have a lot of migrants that are coming over we already have a strapped healthcare system. They're also requiring further needs. So we are spending more time on people coming across the border and more people coming into our country than the people that we already have here right now. We have a major homelessness crisis throughout our entire country, and we are just not taking care of them. And I know the answer is not putting them up in hotel rooms without taking away the drugs, without getting them the proper mental health care that they deserve, and also without getting them the ability to get gainfully employed. What are we doing for their long-term safety and health?
Yeah, these are all valid questions. I wish our leaders would step up and answer them for us. I think it would make us feel a little bit better, a little safer too. It's an ongoing problem. Coming up, Mother Nature is playing a joke on California, what the weather is forcing the state to ask drivers to do just days after it announced a new push for electric vehicles.
I'm feeling electric tonight.
The unknown is not empty. It's a storm that crashes and consumes, replacing thought with worry.
Chicago's mayor slams Texas Governor Greg Abbott for sending busloads of migrants to her city. But should Texas bear the brunt of illegal immigration alone? Senator Bill Cassidy here on that. And Tyrus joins us on everything from Serena's win to Berkeley ordering students who haven't had a flu shot to mask up. I'm John Roberts. Join Sandra and me at the top of the hour for America Reports. We will see you then.
You can know it. That's electric. Woogie, woogie, woogie. And you can hold it. That's electric.
To be a part of this. I was just saying I sit out this song at every wedding. I will not stand up and
start
do the electric
dancing
slide.
now, Julie. Looks like California is going to need to pump the brakes on their electric vehicle plan. Just days after the Golden State regulators banned the sale of gas cars by 2035, a heat wave is now straining California's power grid and forcing the Dem-led city to urge residents to not charge their electric vehicles from 4 to 9 p.m. Jason, that can be a problem because Teslas are very heat sensitive and cold sensitive, as you have found out personally.
Yes, so I used to have a Tesla and I sold it and I bought an F-150 because, you know, I know that'll trigger a lot on the left, but I did that and I made some money doing it. But look, Beaver, Utah, I know you all know Beaver, Utah, but it's right on, right on I-15, beautiful place, a beautiful part of the world. They had about 12 Tesla charging stations, and then they saw how many customers they had, so they upped the number. Guess what? As soon as they opened that, the entire city, the whole county, the surge went, and they had to close it down because residents couldn't get electricity. We don't have the transmission lines in order to do this. We don't have the electricity to do this. So wake up, you green woke people. It does not totally work yet.
I know what I love about California, Jackie, is that they're telling everybody to go out and buy an electric vehicle.
Yeah.
The average price on a Tesla is $66,000.
It's amazing, the irony here. But people are actually going out and buying them because they do drink the green Kool-Aid out there. And so you sit back and say, this is really funny, right? You're straining the grid. And that's the problem here when it comes to going green so quickly. And also, I want to remind everybody, when it comes to electricity, where do you think it comes from? It doesn't come from a genie out of a bottle. It comes from fossil fuels. It comes from natural gas. It comes from coal. It comes from nuclear sources of energy. And so until we have the battery power where we can actually take solar power and wind power, store it, turn it into electricity, and make that sustainable, we are not ready to go this far. And you're just seeing it as an example here in California. But
yeah. Julie?
I mean, they're pushing electric cars because they want to lower emissions, lower air damage, air pollution, all of that, right? But then they're not allowing you to charge your car between 4 and 9. That's rush hour. You're screwed. How are you? So you can't fill up your gas tank because the prices are too high. So you go and buy electric. You spend $60,000 minimum on a Tesla, and now you can't get home. You're better off just quitting your job and collecting from the government, which, by the way, many people don't even have jobs because why do they need one? There's no incentive. The government pays you to stay home.
It's also a mechanism of control, right? They have control over your going and your coming, and that's a problem for people.
Yeah. Well, in California, too, Nicole, I think is so interesting because, you know, as we were talking about earlier, everyone's fleeing California because the high cost of living there and the taxes. At the same time, their power grid, to your point, is weak and it's got a lot of problems. And it's not going to get any better. So they need to fix a few basic issues in that state as far as infrastructure goes before they start telling you that you can't buy a gas-powered car, a new one anyway, after 2035.
Honestly, when I heard this, I just started laughing because they literally just came out with the law saying, oh, well, by 2035, you have to have a battery charged car. It's like, okay, let me know how that works out for you. But it goes to your point. It's like, okay, unless you can only have wind and solar energy powered cars, you can't say that this is all people can do because it's not sustainable. We don't have that infrastructure to support it. And but by the way, don't worry, all the really important people can just hop in their little jet to fly from Orange County to LA anyway. I mean, Kylie Jenner, Meghan Markle, whoever.
Leo.
And exactly. So at the end of the day, it's like, okay, California's trying to do their part in lowering emissions. Fine, I actually respect that, but you have to do it smartly. You have to make sure that you have the infrastructure in place to do it, to Jackie's point. You can't just put these little policies forth because all that's doing is they're checking these boxes because Gavin Newsom wants to run for president one day, that you think he would just look in the mirror and say to himself, I took over state and everybody left. Like, why would anybody put him in charge of the country? You have to do it smartly. They're on the right track, but they're not doing it the way that it should be done.
All of the above. All of the above. We should be pursuing all of the above, but Democrats fight that every single step of the way.
Yeah, woke politics, Jason, I think are really interesting in that state because you were doing nothing but hurting the economy of the state of California.
Well, they tried to do windmills and then they shut them down because raptors, birds were flying into them. So they had to shut that down to save the birds. Then they tried to do solar panels and guess what? Birds flying over that got heat. And that killed the birds, so they had to shut that
I
down.
think Nicole's onto something. Gavin Newsom, wherever he goes, people leave. So actually, I say Gavin Newsom for president because then maybe all the immigrants will leave this country. No? Does that
no.
Illegal immigrants
Far too many
want to
fallouts that
leave
could happen.
if Gavin Newsom. No? Okay, I guess it doesn't work that way.
I have to tell you again, but that those Teslas are going up to $127,000, and I can't believe all these lawmakers coming up on camera and saying like, "Oh, I have an electric vehicle," and I think think that all those poor people in those gas lines. I mean, talk about snobbery.
No, I know. And it's sad because the American public can't afford to pay for gas. But yet again, with Gavin Newsom, and his politics and the way that it affects illegal immigrants here in this country, it's so hypocritical. It's beyond.
But actually, to your point, though, in California, illegal immigrants, they have it great there. They get free health care. They get money to live.
They do.
And so they have more benefits than the actual illegal Americans are. So no, I don't think him being president would pour any illegal immigrants coming, because he would be like, welcome, Americans out.
Yeah, that's true. I guess the rest of us will have to leave.
Well, we're going to stay right here because we've got more coming up. Why Japan is urging young people to drink more alcohol. Last but not least is coming up next.
Won't you come on and raise your